So welcome to Diary of a CTO. My guest today is Alexander Scott, Chief Technology Officer of Sustainable Advantage. Alex, welcome. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. And as everybody says, thank you very much for having me. This will put me outside of my comfort zone a little bit, so happy to be here.
I'm sure you'll be fine. That's what we like to do. No, Alex, I'm sure won't be outside your comfort zone as you're a highly experienced CTO and CIO, over 25 years leading digital technology transformation programs across various industries, so from education, logistics, gaming, financial services, and ESG consulting. But not only that, also on a global level across UK, Europe, US, EMEA, and the APAC regions. And you're now the CTO for Sustainable Advantage, where you're leading their transformation of systems across the organization to further drive innovation in their ESG consultancy services. So a lot to unpack today on the journey. But before we get into what you're doing at Sustainable Advantage, let's talk a little bit about you, the beginning. Talk us through your journey. How did you arrive into technology in the first place, and how's that path evolved over the years to where you are now as a CTO?
Good. I think I've been listening to a few of your podcasts, obviously, and it seems that CTOs come from sort of two directions. One is either they're not from a technology direction, they've been doing a degree in geography, in languages, and they end up in a CTO role, or there's the classic geeky, nerdy, could discover computers at 14, played lots of computer games, was told by the mother that they're never going to make a living out of it. And then and unfortunately, I'm the second.
Well, or fortunately, however you so look at it.
No, I certainly was very lucky. When I was about 13 or 14, the first home computers came out. It's a bit like my brother. He's very good in music. He's done a few sort of like concerts and things like that. And I'm not. I remember the piano teacher, he's older than me, and I started piano lessons, and he asked my parents if I could stop going to the piano lessons. I was that bad.
Good old brothers, eh?
But I found I had that sort of piano playing talent for technology. At 14, I bought a book on assembly language and taught myself to program in assembly language because I wanted the computer to be faster.
The keyboard was your piano?
Yeah. And I think when I hear myself saying it, I think that is just so nerdy. And yes, I played lots of computer games, and I still play computer games. I try not to mention that in job interviews. I'm a serious
What
person.
sort of stuff are you playing now?
At the moment, mostly sort of role-playing games because I can just dip in and dip out.
Yeah.
But I do play a bit of Apex Legends because it's highly competitive. And a bazillion years ago, I was top 10 in Europe for Unreal Tournament.
Really?
Before there was any money.
That quite a dark horse.
Yeah, because if there'd been money, I would not be a CTO now. I'd be running a gaming team or something.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of money in e-gaming now, though, isn't there?
Oh, a huge amount. When I played, there was just, bragging rights, nothing else. But, I think it's just, like I said, it's like playing the piano for my brother. It just comes naturally to me.
Right.
And I think that's really, really helped. I mean, it's classic. I went and did computer-aided engineering, which is basically mechanical engineering, but with computers.
Right.
That degree doesn't exist anymore. They just call it mechanical engineering. But I suppose my career took a really weird turn for me in the sense that, I went to university. I'd never been out of the UK. By the time I got to the end of the university, I was married to an Italian, had a daughter, and was living in Italy.
Wow, you don't waste any time.
and I didn't speak a word of Italian.
Then?
Yeah. Then.
Have it on good authority, you're fluent now.
I am fluent now, although with my wife who's Italian, we speak sort of that combination of English and Italian at home, and it's chaos can ensue sometimes with the combination of the languages. But so I went to live in Italy and started off in an engineering role, designing hyperbaric chambers. So the ones when divers go down to depths at sea and they come back up,
yes,
and they have to decompress. So I was designing those. I mean, It was a wonderful organisation because they did ones for hospitals. So operating theatre size, which was absolutely incredible because obviously some patients haven't got good lung functionality. You can't get the oxygen into them. So if you can operate in a hyperbaric chamber, there's a much higher chance of them surviving. So
I didn't even know that was an application of them, but yeah.
There's a hospital in Zingonia in Italy where there's one of those chambers. And it was thoroughly fascinating. But that's when technology really came to it. So I was doing, a combination of CAD CAM, being a draftsman, the classic drawing on a big board. And then we started to get databases and things. And I was the only one in the office who seemed to have any sort of talent for it. So that started off my career in sort of technology. I then went to work for Dalmine, which is a big steel company in Italy, and did industrial automation, which is just like technology, but at a really large scale. I had a car to drive around to go to the various places that I needed to go to. Right. And that was really interesting because it used all my programming skills. I'm pretty sure it was the first production advancement control system on an intranet. Because the intranet was brand new then. Yeah. I became a really good programmer, but because in the steel industry, it's quite dangerous. You've got molten steel, big vehicles moving around. I learned a lot about programming really, really well because you couldn't have mistakes. And then I started to get into the project management side of things. And then suddenly I was finding myself, I really enjoy programming, but I also really enjoy sort of delivery. Okay. And at some point, I don't remember when, I set a crazy goal, which was I wanted to be an IT director before I was 40. I can't remember why. It was just one of those things. And that sort of pushed me in a career path where I went to work for a couple of American software companies, parametric technology they are used to design, I don't know, Boeing planes, Ferrari cars, that kind of thing, kind of thing, and razor blade, razors as well. So that was sort of pushing me towards being an IT director. And I got to be an IT director, and it was the most disappointing role I'd ever had.
The thrill of the chase, was it? And
there was two reasons. One was because I wasn't that qualified at the time.
How old were you?
I was 37, I think.
All right, you made it with 3 years to spare.
Yeah. But I had quite a lot of the skills, but I didn't have all the tools in my toolkit to do it, and I never really had a good mentor in that space.
Right.
But also, it turned out to be very much sort of operational. Rather than the technology side of things, which was still very good. I mean, it was very good at the operational side, keeping the lights on and keeping the servers working. But I wanted to get back more into that sort of technology space. And then, I started to look at the career from how can I do that? So I went to work for, a mail and logistics company. We did some really interesting stuff there. I mean, it was a big team effort, but they won a Home Office award for their handheld scanners for deliveries. So at the time, today now you would not expect to see a courier without a handheld scanner. But that time they did a handheld scanner that not only took the courier to your door, but it took a picture of your door. It took a description of the door, like you've got, a brass knocker, because we were delivering the UK passports.
Oh, right.
You had to really prove there was, and there was some wonderful people that I worked with there. And, I was doing the technology bit, but the ideas people, and that spurred me on even more. I've had many an opportunity since then. I think, at some point I started to want to get back to kind of what I'd done at DRAS, which was doing the job, but also doing good as well.
Yeah.
I started off thinking it was going to be charities and non-for-profits, but I think it's organizations that generally have a purpose and do good. So, I've worked for Pulsar Space Applications, not to do with launching spaceships, but to do tracking ships around the globe. We used to track piracy incidents. I mean, I often say to people, I used to chase pirates. I mean, usually it was a stolen laptop on a ship, but chasing pirates is much more.
A pirate's a pirate, Alex.
It's much more romantic.
Like Captain Phillips.
Yeah, no. But interestingly enough, that alarm went through our system. So
really?
When it hit the big red button, it went through our system. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And that was a great experience because we went from a monolithic stack in a server room to the cloud-based computing. Education Development Trust was a fantastic non-for-profit for me. They were 170 million turnover when I joined, so not a small company, but it was about global education. So I got to visit Brunei and see schools in Brunei.
Oh, cool.
We did education in prisons. We did schools education. I became the chair of a governor of schools. Not massively qualified at the time. My brother is a teacher and has good qualifications, so he could help guide me. But I'd gone to the school and I was just so enthusiastic about what they were doing. It was wonderful to see all the kids being educated and everything that, they asked me to be chair of governors. And that was an experience I would never have had without the Education Development Trust. And they're still doing an amazing, amazing job out there. And then I was both really unlucky and really lucky. So I decided I wanted to get into more transformation. So I'd taken a job with Euro Car Parks.
Okay.
And then the pandemic hit. So that job lasted, I think, 10 days because nobody was publishing.
I know it's not funny, but that's one of those case studies that's going to be directly impacted.
Yeah, I mean, I have a bone to pick with Boris Johnson, but that was the opportunity for me, because actually it wasn't the right role. The organization, actually a really interesting organization, but just wasn't the right role for me.
Yeah.
And I managed to then interview with a number of sort of non-for-profits and charities, bombed in a couple of interviews. And then I interviewed with Principles of Responsible Investment. And PRI are sort of a top-down approach to sustainability. So if you think of, I don't know, Greenpeace and organizations that are trying to do it from the bottom up, what they do is they work with all the global asset owners and asset managers. So, BlackRock, Aviva Pension, and they try and encourage them to be much more sustainable in their investment practices.
I see.
They've recently had their latest conference down in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, obviously down there because there's COP down there, and various royalties from the UK. But that was a wonderful organization. I got to do, pick up technology they've been delivering during the pandemic and managed to land that, completely replace it with another technology. I got to take on their reporting assessment team with very limited qualification, but learned so much about sort of environmental, social and governance. And now, I find myself at Sustainable Advantage, in some ways doing a similar job, delivering business systems, but we've been launching our sort of sustainability platform. And we're targeting those kind of mid-tier market organizations, whether it's private equity or portcos who, can't afford, to spend huge amounts of money, but are actually really keen to do something about responsible business and sustainability. And I find myself today here in the studio.
There we are. Well, thank you for that, and a very interesting journey indeed. And one of the things I kind of noted throughout your journey is it feels like you sort of follow your gut a little bit and follow the challenge, I suppose. So how important is it to you to enjoy the domain, enjoy the work that you're doing day to day as a CTO?
I'd say it makes a big difference. I think when you're working for an organization that does good, it feels like you can touch something that's making a difference. But I don't think that takes away from what I really enjoy is kind of the problem solving side. And as I've grown in my career, it's been, yes, the technology side, but it's been the delivery side and the strategy side. I've been fortunate to have 2 or 3 people mentor me in my career, an ex-CIO of British Airways, an ex-CEO of Mars, have really sort of helped me sort of transform who I am, because I must admit, I don't like being called a CTO, because people immediately put me in a box and they go, "Oh, you're a CTO. You can program and you just do technology." But it's actually, I do so much more. I've do the delivery side of things. Projects that aren't running well, I've taken on board and transformed them. And I think that's part of where I try and encourage my staff to think about themselves. Don't just think of selfishly about, I'm the database engineer. It's like, what am I doing to transform the company? Having a fast running database is wonderful, but what are you doing to deliver that value to the customer? So I think it is important, but equally, anything that's a challenge, I'm happy to tackle and take on. Am I going to work for a oil company? Probably not. But I recently saw there was one company, a tobacco company, that was trying to be smoke free by a certain time. And I thought, actually, I would never have ever considered that company, but that's quite an honourable goal to be pursuing. Whether they achieve it or not is a separate thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned there that you obviously were, you fell in love with programming. You were a gifted programmer. And then you sought mentorship to allow you to develop in the strategic and the leadership capabilities to sort of move into the C-suite of technology leadership. Do you remember some of the key pieces of advice and the kind of key guidance that you received from those mentors that allowed you to develop in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of 3 that I still come back to today. One was when I was at Informatica, and I went over to the US, and I was in the operational side of IT, and there was the application side of IT, and they didn't talk to each other. And I went over and talked to Tony Young, who was leading that team, and said, "Hey, I'm in the operational team." Introduced myself. He was probably quite surprised because there was a bit of animosity there, but a few weeks later, he became the CIO at Informatica. And, I was kind of grateful that I talked to him, because that meant he wasn't going to fire me. But I went to see him on my next visit, and I said, I said to him, how did you get to become the CIO? I said, it's kind of what I want to be eventually. And he said, I hire people that are better than me. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I can be a really great program manager for a month or 2 months, but then I get bored. I can be a really great CIO for a long time. So what I do is I find people who are really good at being program managers that I need, and I hire them. And it's the same with all the functions in my team. So, my team is just a bunch of really high performing people, and I don't worry that they might, be better than me in something. And I think that was the first. The second I got was I was too nice. So I really care about the teams I work with and the people that I work with. And I was struggling to be successful in an IT director role. And one of the ex-CISOs, or sort of one of the areas of Mars, mentored me for sort of 3 or 4 sessions. And he said, you're doing really well. You've got, you kind of got strategies and programs and process, and, you got to, but he said, you need to have a bit of steel in your spine, because you're really helping your team be successful, but you're not asking them to help you be successful. And I think, that really struck me. And I still do it today. I really do still care about my team, but I also ask my team to help me be successful. And I think that makes the team perform better, because, they understand that you need help as well. You're not just stuck at the top of the pyramid and, you're in your ivory tower or whatever. They're as much as part of my success as I ever will be. And it goes back to the Tony Young one, is if I hire really great people, it really does start to come together. And then I think the last piece of advice that I still take today was from the ex-CIO of British Airways, which was about, it's not about the people when you start. Because I'd always gone in, as many people do, and you go, what's my team? What's the structure? What's the culture? And he said, what you need to do is sort of look at, what's that target operating model you have? What are the outcomes that the business wants you to achieve as a CIO or a CTO or as a senior leader? What are those outputs that you're going to produce for them? And then you start to look at, well, what are the capabilities that I need in my team to be able to deliver that? And then what are the gaps from those capabilities in my team? And then he said, then you've got to be ruthless, because if the gaps are relatively small, you can train people in your team to fill those gaps. If the gaps are relatively large, you need new people, or you need good partners to be working with you. And I think, I still like use today, when I go into a new role, the team's really important to me, but the first thing is I go, okay, what is it that I'm meant to be delivering? I often feel it's a bit like being a football manager these days.
Yeah.
You have a very short time to be successful. And, just being the friend of everybody is not the right thing. Pontificating about some wonderful strategy is not about the right thing, or saying the latest AI buzzwords. It's about setting yourself up for delivery. And by that time, you also set the team up for delivery, because they know what they're meant to be doing. Yeah. They know where the gaps are. People are really happy in some ways to be told that actually we've got a gap here.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anybody here that can fill it. So we're going to go out and hire somebody that will work with us to do that.
Yeah. What I really like from your kind of answer so far is it feels like it's a very pragmatic kind of blended approach. There's the push element, but the pull element as well. And I think that's a really good point to make, because in the world that we live in today, where that sort of dictatorial authoritarian manager is sort of vilified, understandably, I guess, because we probably all work for those types of people. The flip side of that is, like you say, somebody that is a friend first and a manager second, as David Brent would say. And, I think it's a really good point to make that, it's almost like an element of shame sometimes that you are authoritative in your role as a leader. But I think it is that blended approach where, you treat people well. They have, if they feel that you've got their best interests at heart, they will reward you with hard work and loyalty. But you've still got to be, got to point them towards the North Star, haven't you? They've got to know where they're going, and they've got to ultimately buy into that. And like you said, sometimes it's a case of having those difficult conversations, right? If people don't align and they're not fit for purpose for what you need them to be, then it's difficult conversations to have, but for the greater good of you and ultimately them, I guess.
Yeah, no, indeed. And I think, I still do describe my leadership style as benevolent dictatorship. I need to find something better, because I feel terrible when I say it in interviews. Because, what's your leadership? Oh, I'm benevolent. But what I mean by that is, like every good leader, you're empowering your team, you're enabling them to do things, but occasionally you are either setting a direction that they're not happy with or taking a decision that, it can't always be group consensus. I remember in one organization, I could see the cloud coming and I said, right, we're all in for the cloud. This is, I'm not buying any technology that's, kind of on premise, unless there's a really good reason why I can't get it in the cloud. And my IT manager at the time just couldn't buy into that.
What sort of year was that?
2008, I would think, maybe 9.
Yeah, so it was really early days.
Yeah, really early days. And it was really difficult because he was great. It was probably like me 10 years before or something in terms of, skill set, fit, really nice chap as well, but he couldn't get on board. And we tried, we talked through, but eventually left. And it was only many years later when he got in contact briefly and said, actually, you were right about the cloud, that I felt better about it.
Was he working for AWS?
I don't know, but it can be different. Sometimes you're downsizing. I joined one organization and they went, actually, we're in trouble now. Yeah. Can you please let go 25% of your team? And then you have those brutal conversations with people. It definitely isn't about you. It's just about the money. But that's sometimes part of being the leader is you just have to do the difficult stuff.
Yeah, you've got to back yourself, haven't you, and have confidence in your own volition and in your experiences to make the right calls. Totally agree. And they're not always going to be easy, and difficult conversations are going to result. But that's how you affect change at the end of the day. Isn't it?
And it depends on what people pay you for. I mean, like I said, that time I was struggling as an IT director because of being too nice, and it was a wake up call for me.
Yeah, no, great point. What would you say then? You sort of shared quite a few things around the quality or the advice that you received, and some of the important qualities and attributes. Would you say there's any other demonstrable traits or characteristics that you try to embody on a day-to-day basis as a technology leader?
I think there's probably 2 or 3. One that really important to me is still being good at technology. I hear lots of CTOs and CIOs either say I'm now a strategist or I'm really good at technology, or I just still love technology. I can front up to anybody in a technology team and have a conversation about the database, about the programming. I may be completely, rusty in that whole space, but for me, I think it's really important in a technology role to be, keeping up to date with all the latest technology, whether it's AI or whatever's going to come next. Yeah. But also, being able to talk that talk. I mean, why would anybody in my team trust my decision if I don't really know how the technology, works? But I think I couple that with, I think there's that strategic and then delivery side. We've talked about, being that North Star, and I think it's really important that you do have directionality. You need to be able to understand the business, what are the levers that they need to pull, what's the value they're adding to the customers. You need to understand the gaps maybe in the business where they're going to hinder you. If they haven't got good, let's say program management, is that something you need to build into your functionality? But I think, if you're not that North Star, then what direction are you taking as a team? Yeah. And I think that's, but it's not an exclusion of them being still a technologist. I think they both can fit together, and you can have time to do both without a problem. Yeah. But then the 2 that are most important to me are actually delivery and caring. So this is my personal pet peeve, and I apologize to any CTO or CIO that's listening out there, but sometimes I feel some don't do the delivery side. They can talk way better than me about the strategy or the innovation or the theory or where they're going, but then they can't actually deliver it into the business. And I think that's super, super important. You've got your team, however small, however big, you have to be able to deliver those projects into the business. And I think, if you can't do the delivery, then you're really struggling. Now, it doesn't mean to say you as the CTO need to be able to do it. Just hire somebody that can help you do it if you're not capable of doing that. Yeah. I do the delivery. I've found that I love projects that are difficult and hard and complex and multifaceted. I've taken on failing projects. I've run global projects. I've learned many a lesson, got more scars probably than T-shirts. But the delivery is super important. You've got to turn all of that speak and stuff into value. Yeah. And then that last one is about caring. While I am a bit more asking for my team these days, I really do care about people. I would never have thought this. I mean, this makes me sound terrible, but I was a techie. You stick me in a room, no windows, flashing lights, even today, I'm still really happy. My wife knows, you want to keep me happy, just give me something technical to do, and I'll be gone for a few hours. But I started managing people, and I found that I really enjoyed the process of managing people. I wanted to learn more how to do it. I've studied quite a bit, around personalities, how people interact, how people become successful, how to make a high-performing team. And I really, really enjoy it. But it's because I really enjoy seeing people grow. I mean, there's points in my career where somebody's enabled me to be, better, whether it's as a person or a role, get a new position. And I really enjoy doing that for the people. I find it so satisfying to help other people being successful.
Yeah.
Although sometimes it doesn't pay off. I remember once, it was so funny. There was an Australian lady. She was a sales support person, very talented. And, over 18 months, I got her from being sort of sales support to being Salesforce admin, to being a business analyst, to being a product owner. I mean, just stellar career. And I thought, I've done a really good job here. And then there's a LinkedIn post where it was, say who your best manager is. And I could see she posted. So I was straight in there going, this is me. It wasn't.
Oh no.
And I think, that's when my wife comes into it. She says, sometimes my head is just a little too big. Just
Well, look,
a little bit more humility.
I'm going to make it a bit bigger because I mean, I love your answers so far, and I keep using the word pragmatic, but it seems like you've got a very well-rounded view of how the kind of, let's say, I don't want to label CTO, CIO, but technology leadership role should be done, because you kind of mentioned really in that last response that the Holy Trinity, it's sort of the technical acumen, actually being able to deliver, but doing it in a way that people, you build the right culture, and people respect you, and they want to work for you. And I think that is a really great sort of model to exemplify for all technology leaders really. But a couple of questions around that on the technical piece, and I think it's I agree with you. I think it's such an important point that whilst you don't need to be bashing a keyboard all day every day as a CTO, you still need to be up to speed with what's going on, especially in the times we're living in now, right? The speed at which things are evolving. How do you do that as a leader? Are there particular sources, revenues that you sort of visit to understand a little bit more about the current trends, or do you literally just kind of go online, research? What's your view to how you stay close to the coalface technically?
Yeah, I'd love to say it's this really pragmatic thing that I do every week, and but it is about horizon scanning for me. I'm there are a number of people that I've worked with or I've followed for quite a time, and I'm always interested in what they're posting on. I mean, from the obvious, it could be, I don't know, Bill Gates, who's quite interesting, and some of the posts that just is a little bit controversial at the moment on one of those posts. But I try and follow, kind of the people in the industry that are leading the way. A lot of it is that, reading the articles, some of it's in the technical area, some of it's like Forbes and, MIT, who are doing big research. A lot of it used to be, and hopefully will be more in the future, is going to those conferences and talking to people. I've had a bit less time to do that, but I have found you make so many useful contacts and meet so many intelligent people, and sometimes you get lucky as well in the organization. At Polestar Space Applications, there was Edgebar, and he saw the light on DevOps. So I was all in for the cloud, and he saw the light on DevOps at the time, and it was a blindside to me, and he just advocated it, and it was brilliant. I was on board, and I think sometimes you just get to work with that person who's probably going to go on to have a fantastic career as well. I mean, he's been through the BBC and ITV and other locations, so I'd just say horizon scan, know your limits. I mean, I am not good at networking at events. So, I will not do, like an event every week, because that would just drain my emotional battery. But when I do go to an event, I kind of try and do that. It's a classic that you can flip into a slightly different personality for a certain while and survive. And I go into those events and I pretend I'm a good networker and I can talk to people, and I don't mind wandering up to people and starting a conversation.
Well, you're doing a pretty good job now, Alex.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, there's only two.
Not forward that you're just sitting in the corner generally,
No, that's my personality. I still remember when I was something like 5 years old, and my mother had organised this wonderful birthday party for me. and I was just happy by myself. But these are the things that you have to learn through your career. You have to understand that you need to put tools in your toolkit that maybe aren't quite as comfortable to use. Some you'd be really happy to, others you'll be just like, I'll just pull this out now and again. But again, that goes back to that, hiring people are better than some things at me.
Yes.
I'm a real keen advocate of that kind of culture within a team. But I always look to hire one or two people that are real advocates of that, have got a passion for it every minute, every day. Because, I can do it in those sort of contained spaces, but then my emotional battery goes down a little bit and I need to recharge. But if you have somebody who's just sort of pinging off the walls and full of that energy, that's the way to do it. Know your weaknesses and hire people to help you fill them in.
Yeah, agreed. And I always, say this as a point I make quite often on this podcast, but I do feel it's a real trait of a successful leader in the days that we're living in now, is that self-awareness piece, of understanding, I'm not invincible. There's certain areas I'm good at, I'm strong at, certain areas I'm not, but like I say, building a team that complements you, around all of those aspects of ultimately delivery, like you said. Yes. But caring about people, as you mentioned as well, is a really big piece of it. But you mentioned there around building a team and, fostering a culture. How do you go about that as a leader in terms of fostering a successful culture within the teams that you look after?
Yeah, I think that's an impossible question.
Good. Well, give it a go.
No, I mean, I'll go back to sort of the answer I gave earlier on about looking at that sort of target operating model first. I think the first thing I do is I don't focus on the team, whether they're a high-performing team or dysfunctional team. I focus on, how we're going to function. What are we going to deliver to the business? Why are we going to deliver to the business? What are we going to stop delivering to the business? Because I think there's no point trying to have this wonderful culture in your team if you're not doing work that's worthwhile. And if you don't have the right people as well, because then, unfortunately, you've got people who you have in your team, but they're just maybe in the wrong role. Maybe they're in the wrong team. Maybe they're in the wrong organization. And, your teams are generally, quite small. I've managed teams of up to about 60 or 70, but I've managed teams of 5. But in any team of that size, if you have 2 or 3 people that are unhappy, it can really impact the culture. And I'm not saying, they shouldn't be unhappy. I'm just saying it can make it very difficult. Yeah. And then I think it is really about then saying, explain to the team what your values are, but it's not necessarily that you expect them all to have those values. But, I often start with things like, if I see an issue, I own an issue and I'll deal with it. Even if it's not my issue, it's a chair that's broken. I'm going to make sure that chair gets fixed. Because I think that's really important to me. I'm not about, it's just my IT things over here and I'm going to ignore those, which can be sometimes annoying the business because people are wondering, why is Alex trying to help out in this area? I ended up running a facilities team for a year because I was just too helpful in figuring out how hot or warm an office was.
So do you proactively take that upon yourself to share your value base with the people that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, what I do is when I join an organization, I sort of share my values. I kind of broadcast. I say, look, this is me. This is where I've come from. I'm a mental health first aider. I'm an LGBTQ ally. I've, kind of lived in Italy. I tend to be quite shy. I broadcast all that out to people. But then with the team, we try and sort of work on that sort of culture charter or whatever's appropriate within the organization you're working with. You don't want to try and force it, but what works for that team and have some values that you can embody, and not 27 values, but just things that are sort of like mini North Stars for the team, so that people understand that, it's all right to make mistakes. It's perfectly fine to wander into my office and go, I've completely blown it. I have probably not a good example anymore, but when I was working at Electronic Arts, for some reason, people did not want to say when they'd made a mistake because, the Electronics was developing big computer games, Burnout Paradise, Harry Potter games, and we were the IT team supporting them. And if the servers were down, you couldn't code or you couldn't build the game. But the culture of the team was a really friendly, game playing team. We were out playing football, we were playing games. So I bought a pair of clown shoes, and I don't know whether I regret this or not. I think not. And the idea was that if you made a mistake, but you didn't want to tell somebody about it, just grab the clown shoes and hang them on your desk. And it was hugely successful because people bought into it. It wasn't about trying to ridicule them or make them feel small. It was just a way of saying, the same for me. Sometimes I don't want to go and tell my wife that I've made a mistake.
Yeah.
It was just an easy way. You could just put the clown shoes and then somebody would wonder from going,
it's getting the dialogue started.
Yeah. What have you done? It's like, just patched the server and it's crashed.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I'm actually, I can see how it would work well.
Yeah. I can hear a few HR departments tutting at me, but again, it was the culture of the team. It wasn't, in other teams I would never have considered that, but in that team we were just bouncing off each other.
Well, ultimately, it solves the problem, right? And that's the thing, isn't it? If everyone feels comfortable and, like you say, you're not doing it from a place of ridicule, you're doing it from a place of just genuinely trying to increase.
Yeah, after a while, the clown shoes just stayed where they were because people were quite happy then just to sort of talk about it.
Yeah,
and they made few mistakes as well.
Good stuff. I was going to say, I thought you were going to make them wear them for a week, but
well, actually. I mean, that was quite they were a really good pair of clown shoes. I think I overinvested in them.
Well, they definitely wouldn't make that mistake twice, would they?
Yeah.
Cool, good. So let's talk a little bit about your current role then, Sustainable Advantage. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing there and your general approach to how you're transforming the systems.
Yeah, so I mean, Sustainable Advantage was a kind of a great opportunity for me. So, I'd had a really good time at PRI, I've taken their team from a small team to a large team, delivered a whole new framework for reporting assessment, ran the reporting assessment team. But, I was looking for another sustainability opportunity because, there aren't that many around there. If you go and work for a, KPMG or a PwC, you find a lot. I got sort of half headhunted in the sense that I was not quite looking, but I was looking. And I went into interview and, it was a kind of that organization where you can have an impact. It was about 80 people. So, I could see lots of opportunities to impact. They were really wanting to transform in terms of they wanted new business systems. They definitely wanted a sort of ESG sustainability system built for them because, they were competing with some of the bigger companies out there and things were sort of more Excel spreadsheet based, which actually will be for a number of years. People love Excel and there's nothing wrong with it. So it felt like that just kind of perfect opportunity to me. I was bringing my ESG experience from PRI, big dog name in the sustainability space. They were giving me lots of opportunities to take on a number of projects. Some of them, like, installing a new CRM sales system was kind of going back to something I hadn't done for 10 years. So just trying to remember how does that work? And the people were fantastic. I mean, it was, founder led, I must admit, I love the chairman because at the interview process, he asked me, he said, so, if you join, what do you think your biggest challenge will be? And I said, probably you. and because he's the founder, so, he's built the business. He's clearly got some really good ads. He's, bright, intelligent, forthright. And he still hired me. So, that was really great.
Well, at least now he's going to be honest.
But he has pushed hard. I mean, in the first sort of 12, 15 months, we introduced a new finance system, a new sales system, a new waste management system. Just shortly after that, we released the first iteration of our sustainability platform. We've got sort of 4 variations on sort of that to come to address various market niches. Now we've got probably improvements to the business system. Just hired a new sort of CEO into the business, who's really proving to be very effective. Getting on really well with him.
Excellent.
So it was kind of one of those where it gave me the opportunity to test all the skills I'd probably had throughout my career in a very short period of time.
Fair play. That sounds great. And it's nice, isn't it, I think, again, you're setting the stall out to be transparent. And I think it's important to do that at peer level as much as it is to do it, at the people that you're managing. But it's nice when you kind of met halfway where people genuinely back you, follow through on it and give you the opportunity to affect change, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing worse than a manager that kind of doubts you or doesn't back you. And I've had 1 or 2 of those in my life.
Or says one thing and does another.
Yeah. Earlier in the career, I had just the worst manager in the world. And they actually formed a lot of how I manage because they thought, I never want to be like that.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, totally agree. It's you can look at it very philosophically, can't you? At the end of the day, it helps shape you as a
I mean, I've learned a lot from the good managers and the bad managers. I'm not saying everybody should go out there and have a number of bad managers in their career, but I think, I always took the opportunity of learning, what would I do differently? And quite a lot of them had actually good learnings in terms of they weren't great people managers, but they were very good at managing businesses.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a very fair point, actually. And thinking about the people that I've worked with in the past, that I wouldn't necessarily have subscribed to their management style, but yeah, probably very successful in terms of other ways. I guess it depends how you quantify success, doesn't it? But that's maybe for
I mean, everybody's different.
exactly that. That's maybe for another episode. We'll get a bit more philosophical, but no, going back to your journey, what would you say have been some of the biggest challenges that you faced throughout your career, and how did you overcome them?
A lot to unpack here. Probably one or two amusing ones. So when I was working at the steel company, we were doing the production advancement control, and we decided we were going to track the sort of the steel tubes through the factory, and they were, I don't know, 1,000 degrees Celsius. I can't remember the exact temperature. So we decided we were going to barcode them with these sort of highly resistant barcode labels. And one of the guys, spent about 2 hours on the line just slapping them on with like an asbestos glove in his hand. Came back with no eyebrows.
Seriously?
I mean, they were a lot smaller than when he started the process. But I had some servers kidnapped once. A company we were working with went bankrupt, and the hosting company just turned all the systems off and wouldn't turn them back on until we bought the servers from them. We had to buy them at twice the price that they were actually worth.
That's not legal, surely.
I'm sure it wasn't, but it was a case of, I'm going to be down for 3 days while I restore all my stuff somewhere else. So I'm going to be down for 3 hours. So we took a considered decision on that one. But I think in terms of big challenges, I think probably two that stand out to me. The one was, we talked about PRI, where I joined during the pandemic. And I think, building a team for a number of months where I didn't actually get to meet people was a huge challenge. And, at that time they were releasing their new reporting assessment, but the platform wasn't that great. So I had to land that one, as well as figure out how to land it on a new platform, as well as building a team, as well as winning hearts and minds within PRI, because I was their, kind of first IT director at the time. They didn't even want a C-level person. They wanted an IT director. I eventually got the C-level title because that's kind of where I wanted to be. But, that was hugely challenging because there were so many moving parts. But I think I was successful there because of my team. I mean, PRI were fantastic. They allowed me to grow the team. They trusted that as I started to deliver results, I would continue to deliver results. But I grew the team and hired some really good people into the team, because it was a small team. There was plenty of hiring going on, whether it was in quality assurance, whether it was in kind of the software delivery. One or two of the people I'm still working with, but no longer at PRI, but have come to work with me.
Okay. And
I think that was, a really interesting challenge from the pandemic. I don't think I'll ever see a challenge like that again, unless we have another pandemic. But probably the one that was most challenging was when I went to work for Education Development Trust, because there everything was about education. Whether it was in a prison or a school or a national curricula for one of the countries in the Middle East, the focus was really on delivering educational impact, and that meant sort of kind of the internal teams didn't quite get the recognition. I mean, I suppose that's not fair. I mean, they got the recognition they deserved. They were internal teams, and the educational work was so much more important, I must say. I absolutely. But the challenge there was we were doing a sort of a global rollout of an ERP system, so finance, HR, the whole shebang. I was just doing the IT bit, making sure it was in the cloud at the time, and then the program manager left. I think he went to work for Williams Formula One, so fair play. But I had to pick that project up, mid-flight, and I had to go to the board and say, this project's going to fail, because I'd looked at it and said, we're not going to deliver in these timeframes. So my first conversation with the board, after having picked it up and being sort of kind of that, savior, was like, this project's going to fail.
Yeah. How did that go down?
It went down really well, actually. Because
I was going to say, I think it would, because at least they know about it, right? Rather than finding out at the last minute.
Yeah. Also because I came with options.
Right.
I said, we can stop and cut our losses, or actually we can refactor and we can look to do it slightly differently. And they were fully on board with that. We landed the project, and again, it was about the wonderful people. I mean, I was leading the team, but I still remember, Esther, who was doing the training, we had people seconded in from HR, and they just, worked hard, pulled out all the stops. And because they were really passionate about the results that Education Development Trust was doing around the globe and in the UK, it was just amazing to see the team come together. But again, all of that was about using the skills I had about, how do you do good program management? Are we getting the culture in the team right? And there was one strange session where we threw oranges around a meeting room table to build team culture, but it proved really effective. So you bring all those pieces together, and it does work. I mean, I think you got to have a slightly unstoppable feel sometimes, because I get overwhelmed. There's too many things going on. I'm going, I can't do it. This is just too complex. But then you've got to go, okay, now let's, in my words, chunkify it and break it down into something that I can do right now. And then let's break some of the other deliverables into some of the deliverables that other people can do.
Yeah.
And I think, you kind of, but you got to be sort of unstoppable, because otherwise, you'll go, this is just too hard. I'm going to get off the train. No, keep going, break it down, try it differently, do different angles.
Goes back to your problem solving mindset, doesn't it? And I think that's a great tool to have in the arsenal. We definitely all get overwhelmed, no matter where we are. But actually sometimes thinking, all right, well, what is just the next logical step from here?
Yeah.
What can we do? And then, like you said, not only you, how can you get others to help us?
No. And I think you can get new tools all the time. I mean, for years, I've sort of been looking at people who, I meditate, I do wellness, I do this. I'd never found anything that really sort of chimed for me. I used to blame it because I'm a Yorkshire lad and we don't do any of that. But that was just because nothing really worked for me. And then I found an app on the iPhone, as you do, and it was called Healthy Minds. And I actually found it really clicked with me. It started off with just sort of 5-minute meditations, and then you could go up to 30 minutes. And now I find that when I travel into London on the train in the morning, rather than doing 3 or 4 emails, I'll do half an hour of meditation, and it really sets me up for the day or the week. And I try and pick things that are relevant to the problems I'm solving in the office, whether it's a people problem or a delivery problem.
Yeah.
But this is 2 years in my toolkit.
What was it about that app in particular that resonated with you?
I think because it was not preaching to you.
Right.
I mean, it gave you options. It gave you a start. It gave you an end point. You could choose your path. It didn't say how long you needed to do it. It didn't say how often you do it. It never reminded me that I needed to do it.
Right.
And I started off doing a 5-minute here and thought, oh, that's really long. And now I find I'm doing half an hour and going, I could do with another half an hour of that. But I think that not preaching to me and not constant reminding me, it's a bit like, it's the opposite of Duolingo. I'm slowly trying to learn Japanese because I love it.
I mean, see, I tried with Duolingo as well, but then I got peed off with a notification.
Yeah, exactly. I love. I've been to Tokyo a couple of times. So I love Japan. Yeah. But the thing that annoys me about Duolingo, it's actually quite good. I've learned quite a bit of Japanese. Not that I can really speak it, but I can understand it.
Yeah.
But then after a day, it goes, you haven't seen you for a day. Yeah. And that puts me off.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll be back when I'm back. I've probably got more important things to do at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a great point to raise. And you spoke quite a bit so far about when you step into a role, hiring good people, and interested to understand as a leader, do you feel there's any kind of overarching characteristics or traits that you look for in people to join you, irrespective of the role, whether it's a technical role, not a technical role, whether it's a QA engineer, whatever it may be? Is there anything that you kind of use as a bit of a toolkit as to how you assess people fit for you as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. So it used to be many, many years ago that, I'd look for sort of, the technical fit to the role, or the, the detail orientedness because I'm, a project manager. But I found, over the last, it's probably 15, 20 years that I've drifted much more to sort of 2 things that seem to work for me. One is I really like people who prepare for the interview, for the role, because it shows that you're putting the effort in. And I know that's quite narrow, but I find, when people turn up and they haven't prepared, I just think, well, you're probably not going to be right for me at that level. I remember this wasn't for my role, but somebody turned up for an interview and they appeared in reception. And I happened to be in reception at the time, and they pulled their jacket out of a carrier bag, and it was all crumpled. And I thought, you're not getting the job. You should have got your jacket just pressed or something, because either don't wear the jacket or wear the jacket. So I think being prepared for it. And then the other one that is the 98% these days is that sort of diversity piece. I think just people are different from me. Nobody, we all know that don't hire the people who look exactly like you, because then you just get that kind of cookie cut. But I try to have people that, might even make me feel uncomfortable. I think you've got to lean into things. So I'm at the moment trying to lean into sort of, how can you get that sort of more neurodiverse people into an organization? Because often the role you're hiring, it's a BA role and it's Monday to Friday, isn't going to work for somebody who's neurodiverse, and then could you split it into two roles, and make it match that way. So, I really like that sort of diversity aspect, and the teams that I've had that have been most diverse, whether it's, culture, neurodiversity, or whatever, are the ones that have been most successful. Not the easiest to manage, because you have such interesting and sparky personalities going on. But I think it also helps me grow. I've often had to lean into things where I found it quite uncomfortable, because I don't like it, but it's because I just lack the knowledge. And that's pushed me to do sort of, trainings. I did a training on sort of LGBTQ and trans bullying in the workplace, because I just felt I didn't really understand enough about it.
Interesting.
But that's not something that's easy to sort of, say out loud in a meeting. I don't know enough about this. And I think, that diverse team is constantly, not constantly, but quite often making me lean into things where maybe I'm a little bit uncomfortable. And I think that's really useful. And like I said, diverse teams are actually just so much fun as well.
Yeah, that's it. But like I say, it's that awareness piece, isn't it? Of recognizing, okay, maybe this is an important thing, right? And this is something maybe I don't know enough about, and doing something about it at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, like I said before, I'm a mental health first aider, but that came from sort of my lived experiences of, how I was treated. This was a long, long time ago, but when I was in Italy, my first wife died.
Oh, nice.
And, I still remember today that the company I worked for kept sending a doctor every week to see whether I was fit to return to the office. And the doctor would appear at the door and see this, fit and healthy young 25-year-old and think, oh, I've caught this one. And then said, so why at home? And I said, well, my wife's died. And they went, okay, signing you off for another week. But, there was no concept from the workplace at the time to help me with what I was going through. I'm not saying they should have, because it was quite a while ago. But, I think that's what sort of from there and onwards has led me to being, it's really important to think about that sort of mental health side of people. And I still don't always succeed. I don't always get that balance right with my employees. Sometimes push them too hard or let them push themselves too hard. But yeah, I think these are the things that I think make you a better manager, because plenty of people can do the technology, plenty of people can do the delivery. What are the kind of the extra sort of jigsaw bits on the outside that people can fit into?
Oh, massively. And I think mental health, just respect for people's mental health, is something that I've noticed has been so absent in the management teams that I've certainly worked for in recruitment specifically. And obviously it's a fast-paced sales industry, very much about targets, but very little to any consideration really for anybody's mental health. But when you mention you're a mental health first aider, what does that mean in reality? How does that, how do you affect that day to day?
I think there's two or three aspects. One is actively promoting it. I wear the badge. I let people know that, I'm a mental health first aider, that it's important to me that people's mental health, that, they can come and talk to me. So within an organization, I advocate and an ally in that space. I think the other one is, being available, so that people feel they can approach you. It's one thing saying you're that, but I mean, are you approachable? Would somebody genuinely want to come to me and share such an intimate problem that they're having? And I think that's, you've got to think about how you present yourself in the day-to-day business. So sometimes I'm presenting myself as the CTO and manager, and there's that position, but other times I'm presenting myself as somebody who's approachable. And I think the third part to that is taking time to be aware when people might need a conversation. Because in work, you're so busy doing the day-to-day work. It's taking those, few minutes of a day and just looking at somebody and thinking, hey, that's not normally how they are. They're looking a bit sad, or maybe they're just, isolating themselves a little bit, and having the courage to go up to somebody and say, how are you? But not just in a, how are you? And everybody goes, I'm fine. I mean, that's what I do. I'm always fine. I'm always super fine. But just say, how are you? And how's it going? And, what's it like today? And, you're looking a bit sad, because if you're wrong, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I think,
at least people feel like you care, right? Like, again, back to your point earlier.
Yeah. I mean, and I do care. I mean, through life, you experience ups and downs. And, I knew somebody who was the most wonderful person, sparkly personality, wonderful beard, just the most annoying beard, outdid my tiny little beard by 1,000. And, one day I sent them a message and said, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. How are you doing? And then about a week and a half later, I'd heard they'd killed themselves. And, there was nothing I could do about it. I'd sent the message, I'd tried to talk to them, but, if there'd have been somebody else close to them that was maybe a mental health first aider, or maybe it could change. I mean, I know it can't, but, I think, that's why sometimes I'll drive into these slightly uncomfortable things within a work environment. Because if I didn't talk about mental health, or I didn't talk about my LGBTQ allyship, that'd be fine. It wouldn't affect my career. I'd still have a very good career. Yeah. But I feel these are, important, and that's what makes me who I am. And it's certainly different from how I was when I was 20 or 30 or 40. But it's wonderful to be sort of on that kind of growth journey.
Yeah, totally. And these are really important topics that aren't going anywhere, right? They become more prevalent in all walks of life. And I think again, it's a great trait of a leader to take that upon yourself to just raise awareness of it, have the dialogue around it, because that's such a big part of mental health, isn't it? And especially with not casting aspersions over whole genders or kind of how people identify, but with most guys, you do tend to find that there's a real reticence there to actually talk about it, but sometimes just somebody proactively reaching out to you to go, are you okay, right?
I mean, I'm still rubbish talking about my own mental health.
So am I, absolutely.
But again, this is why I think when people go, you're a CTO or a CIO, I go, yeah, but I think there's so much more you can be.
Yeah.
And for me, I find it so satisfying. I mean, I love delivering the technology or the system, but I love that. Maybe a little bit about culture change or helping somebody out. I think that it all makes being a CTO a wonderful thing to do.
Absolutely. Well, look, Alex, really, really enjoyed the conversation today. I think you've shared a massive amount of value, and just really interesting to hear your approach to leadership. And I can see how you've been such a successful technology leader over the last 25 years. So I'd like to draw to a close, as you may know by now, with asking the same question of every guest. You've obviously shared a lot of advice already, so I'm going to see if I can push you for one more nugget, which is, what would you say has been your favorite piece of advice that you've received throughout your journey?
I'm going to go back and use some of my answers from previous, because it's my favorite, because I think the advice I got from Tony Young about hiring people that are better than you was, as a salesperson, I always say, was gold dust. I think how I've elaborated on that by hiring people that are also diverse from you, I think if you do those two things, and preaching to people who are probably already doing, I think that really makes a difference. Just hire people that are better you, better program managers, or a better project manager, or better at culture, and just hire people that are diverse and different from you, and you will have a really successful team.
Great way to encapsulate the episode. And I think, it is a fantastic piece of advice. And like you said, may sound very logical, but I still think there's lots of companies out there that aren't doing it, right? Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's great to hear your successes off the back of that approach. So, look, fascinating conversation. Really appreciate you coming on and having a chat with us today. Please do come back and speak with us again. And for anyone listening, thanks for tuning in. Please feel free to share the episode with anyone you feel may be gaining value from it. And please join us again for another episode of the Diary of a CTO in the not too distant future.